Okay, guys, I have a visual this week, so get ready. All right, so we're back. Two reasons why we're back. Number one, my wife is kind of sick and tired of me talking about sports all the time, and I completely understand that. So if you're gonna have to talk about it out loud, talk about it with two of your good friends. And number two, this happened. I think I'm sick and tired. I think after this we have to call it DEFCON 5 and kind of understand. I now don't approve of this whatsoever. I agree, it's a lot of good, but let's just stop it right there.
That is gross.
It's unique. It's creative. It's MacGyver.
I did say that at first, but then I realized
same time, it's just all sorts of wrong on so many levels in so many ways.
Look, I just want to know, was it ballpark? Was it Sabrets? Was it Hebrew National?
Usually at Nathan's if you're getting it from the stadium. Anyway, I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
And I'm Jay Kaplan.
And the Sasha's King of Chicago here is Anthony Strait.
All right, welcome back to On the Sports Lines. This is our college football preview. College football is back, and actually this week starts week 0, which has a game in Dublin, and I'm very confused about that already, and I don't really want to understand why. But over the next week, we're about to go back to school, so Dean Stephen Rabinowitz and my adjunct professors over here are about to put you back in session. We're going to have predictions to end the show, but we're going to talk teams, we're going to talk coaches, we're going to talk Heisman favorites, we're even going to talk about games in week 1. That's all before that, so let's get to it. So the college football landscape seems to be going through the narrative that it's the SEC, the Big Ten, and everybody else. We here on the Sports Lines like to tell you that that's not changing in this statement. So this segment, I'm so sorry about that. Alabama is number 1. I know, shocking. In the preseason poll, they have all but 9 first place votes and look to be the first wire-to-wire national champ in 5 years since Alabama in 2017. So we're going to look at the top 3 teams in the AP poll. They all have their own little cases to be the national champ of 2023. So Jay, you're first. You get to make a case for the team who Nick Saban said had a rebuilding phase last year. Such bullshit. The guy who's going to become 80 as the head coach of this team, as he just got signed to a contract extension. Please make a case for Alabama, because I can, but I don't want to.
I got you, probably. But here we go. Okay. Entirety of Nick Saban's time as the Tide's head coach, even though it's actually just the 9th time. And each time it's been a real easy to make the case, especially over the last 15 years where they spent at least 1 week at number 1, that they've deserved it. And this time is no different, especially with them returning the best players in the nation on each side of the ball in reigning Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Bryce Young and reigning SEC and national year linebacker Will. Alabama's defense is loaded, just how Saban likes it. And Dallas Turner, who quietly had 8.5 sacks last year, mark this down. He's going to be a household name by the time the season ends. And a pair of transfers, wide receiver Jermaine Burton from Georgia and running back Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech, should upgrade both of those positions. Gibbs, who had 1,211 yards from scrimmage, averaging 5.2 yards a carry and 13.3 yards a catch, is a legit Heisman contender in his own right and will be a weapon out of the backfield as both a runner and a receiver. And Burton, who had 25 catches for a little under 500 yards, he averaged a little over 19 per catch and 5 scores, joins a wide receiver room that lost a huge amount of talent in the last 3 NFL drafts and doesn't return anyone who had more than 21 catches. The big unknown on the offensive side of the ball is the offensive line, which was average at best for most of last season, and then lost offensive tackle Evan Neal to the NFL. Emil Akayar, Javion Cohen, and Darian Delacourt give the Tide 3 returning starters up front, but there's still enough uncertainty on the offensive line that it's one of the few areas that could derail the season, if not resolve. It starts with them keeping Young upright and healthy. The O-line gave up 41 sacks last season, which worked out to 2.73 per game. That ranked 103rd in the nation. The 6.9 tackles for loss per game that the O-line allowed was 111th in the nation. They don't need to return all the way to their play from 2018 to 2020, where they allowed a total of 47 sacks, but they can't repeat last season's play. And it wasn't just pass protection. Crimson Tide finished 74th in yards per rush, 4.1. That's their worst ranking in that category since Mike Shula's final season as coach in 2006. And it was the most glaring in short yardage situations. 12 times on fourth down runs, Alabama averaged only 0.75 yards per carry. Third downs with 1 to 3 yards to go, 3.95 yards per carry, converting only 59.4% of the time, down from 73.8 in 2020. If the offense struggles at any point this season, the defense can pick them up, as Anderson in his SEC and national leading 17.5 sacks and 31 tackles for losses will have plenty of help on that side of the ball. Along with Turner up front, middle linebacker Henry 2020, I hope I pronounced that right, is back for another season as the defensive signal caller after leading the team with 112 tackles after coming over to Bama as a transfer from Tennessee. The back end of the defense has safety Jordan Battle, who is fourth on the team in tackles, returned 2 of his 3 picks for scores. Battle coming back for his senior season gives the Crimson Tide an experienced leader at each level of Pete Gold top 10 unit. The schedule isn't easy, but they don't have to play Georgia in the regular season, so there's a plus. The toughest game on the schedule is a visit from 6th-ranked Texas A&M in week 6, and after the trading of provocative statements between Saban and Jimbo Fisher, this will be one to watch. The Tide have 2 other preseason top 25 teams on their schedule, number 19 Arkansas in week 5, number 21 Ole Miss in week 10. Both are road games. They also have to travel to Austin, Knoxville, and Baton Rouge. None of those are easy environments, but the Tide are used to being the SEC's evil empire when they leave the house that Bear built. We've been saying this practically every year of late, and it's true once again this year. The college football national championship goes through Tuscaloosa and will continue to do so as long as Nick Saban is running things. As Rabbi said at the top, when a 13-2 season and a loss in the national title game is considered a down year, and you return your 2 best weapons from that down year and add more, it's hard to see how the Tide don't roll. So their case for being the preseason number 1 is as captain obvious as it gets. No surprise here, guys.
No, it's
And
not.
he's going to be around forever at this point. Talking about Nick Saban.
He signed an extension, as we mentioned this week, that will take him to 79 years old. One thing I do have to say about Alabama, and I didn't realize this until I just went over it this week, they had 4 games where they won by 2, they won by 7, they won by 6 against LSU, a bad LSU team.
Yep.
And they had a 4 overtime game against Auburn, not to mention the A&M loss that they had in College Station, and of course the national title game. But it's a much better team. Maybe they're not a consensus number 1, although, like I said, it's hard to bet against Alabama when you return your best player on offense and best player on defense, and they both could be the best players in America on each side of the ball.
Right. And Rabbi, we've seen this in more than one occasion during Saban tenures that, he'll come into the season and it doesn't seem like he's loaded with a million NFL number, top.
This is a little bit different though.
But the thing is time and time again, guys who aren't household names before the season starts wind up, rising up people's draft boards as we get through the meat of the SEC season and into the postseason. So it'll be interesting to see who on this team that we don't really know yet. We'll be saying their names a lot come the end of the season.
Also, one of the most interesting things is the fact that college football and even college basketball has gotten into a situation where you could have a great performance during the season and rise up your stock. It's happened to a lot of different players. Okay, Anthony, you get Ohio State, who is also loaded at all these positions, and they suffered a great indignity to their whole organization last year, losing to Jim Harbaugh's Michigan Wolverines. There is no greater indignity than losing to Jim Harbaugh's Michigan Wolverines, but they are reloaded, Anthony, more than any other team in the country, maybe even more than Alabama.
Well, I have to correct you. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes,
yes.
FYI, number 1. Number 2, yeah, you're right. I mean, look, for any other team, 11-2 record with an 8-1 conference record and a Rose Bowl victory would be a very good season for all things considered. But when you are the Ohio State Buckeyes and that loss comes at the hands of your arch nemesis in Ann Arbor, by the way, a 41-27 outcome, to say the least, which propelled Michigan to the college football playoff instead of you. That's kind of a slap in the face you had to deal with for the last 7 months. But Ryan Day going into year 4 of his regime, he comes back loaded. He still has arguably the best offense in college football throughout the land. They were number 1 last year, number 1 in scoring, and number 2 in third down conversions, number 3 in passing, and so on and so on. And a guy you're going to be talking about later on in the show, CJ Stroud, is leading the charge on the offensive side. 4,400 yards passing to go with 44 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 72% completion percentage. And now, here's the thing. He lost Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, both in the NFL at this point. But Jackson Smith,
Jackson Smith Najigba.
Jackson Smith Najigba is back, along with Marlon Harrison Jr., who is a guy that I think that shows our age, because we remember his dad in the National Football League. Then you got Trevion Henderson coming back in the backfield. So offensively, I don't think Ohio State's going to miss a beat. Defensively, however, is where the Buckeyes had their issues last season. Remember the opening game against Northwestern, and Northwestern kind of had their way with them on a running game. They struggled against the run. They actually gave up less than 20 points a game in the middle of the season. It was the beginning of the season and towards the end where they had their defensive struggles. Overall, they allowed 1,900 yards in the first 2 games of the season and closed the season, giving them close to 1,000 yards, and got into a shootout in the Rose Bowl
with Utah. Yeah.
With Utah, and only won by 3. In comes new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, who comes over from Oklahoma State, who may actually be the biggest addition in the offseason if Ohio State is going to get back to the college football playoff, because a lot of games is going to be determined whether or not their defense can hold up. Look on the defensive side of football, Steel Chambers more likely to stick around with the weak side position, and then switch it to a 4-2-5 alignment. Not played last season, so that's what timing. I may be the secondary when you think of Ronnie Hickman being a free safety, Josh Parker, and Tanner McAllister also kind of showing up that secondary. But I tell you what, it's going to the offense for Ohio State. It's not going to be the problem whatsoever. They're going to score at will. The question is going to be defensively, can they get enough stops when it matters the most? If they can do that, then Ohio State definitely would be in the running for the Big Ten championship and definitely be in the conversation to be one of those Final Four teams in the college football playoff.
Only 4 road games this entire year, and they do not have to go on the road until October 8th at Michigan State. They get Michigan in the Big House. And honestly, it's a down year for most of the Big Ten. There's a gap between Ohio State, that whole Ohio State-Michigan tandem, and Michigan is still kind of an unknown to a lot of people just because of how everything happened last year, and can they kind of catch lightning in a bottle again. So Ohio State does have a lot of things going for them. They're going to be and outside of Alabama, there's no other trendier pick than Ohio State. Nope. Name to mention, though, Jackson Smith Najigba had over 340 yards in the Rose Bowl against Utah. A 30-1 Heisman choice. If you want to lay a little bit of money, that might not be a bad choice. So wide receiver won it 2 years ago. Why not him? Okay. So Georgia is the defending national champions and the consensus number 3 team in the AP poll. And a lot of people think they're probably the consensus number 3 team in the country. There is a gap between those two and Georgia. I will completely admit it. And Georgia does not have the biggest history of being a national champion. They didn't do it for 42 years until they won it this past year. They had won their last title in 1980. It's a good team that comes back. They have good wide receivers in Dominic Blaylock and Ladd McKinley coming back, but you're missing George Pickens. And Jay, you're noticing the love of George Pickens over with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. They do get one of the best tight ends in college football, probably the best tight end in college football, in Brock Bowers. If you didn't see him last year, he's going to make a big impact this year. And they get back Stetson Bennett. the fourth, as you could think. That's the possibly whitest name you could ever come up with in a college football player. But Bennett is one of the only players to actually return from a national championship team. So it's good to have national championship experience at the helm. The defense is always going to be loaded, but they have three starters returning from last year. Two starters returning from last year. They ended up sending 5 first-rounders to the NFL. It was possibly one of the greatest defenses we've ever seen, and possibly could have been the greatest college defense we've ever seen if it weren't for their SEC championship performance against Alabama. Everything is going to kind of revolve on that. Can the defense play at the same level that they did last year? If they can, this is a national championship team that could be talked about between the other two teams. The schedule is also favorable for them, but we'll talk about their first game in a moment. They play Oregon, but there are trappy games in there. The SEC East is not the SEC West. I think we know that for damn sure. At South Carolina, they play Missouri. They have the world's largest tailgate coming on October 29th. Mississippi State and Kentucky. Those are their road games. The biggest home game on that schedule. It is a ridiculously easy home schedule, but they do have Auburn in the beginning of October. A lot of the times in the Georgia era, you've seen them have this one or first or second loss going in to that national championship game where they let their guard down. If they end up playing Alabama in an SEC championship where the situation is win and get in, I don't know if they could do that this year. I don't think this team has enough firepower to get over the top. I think there is a lot of excitement in Georgia coming off a national championship, but there is also a lot of trepidation in Georgia coming off
guys off last year's team, Rabbi.
They did. Oh no, I know that exactly. But especially, like I said, especially the defense and especially some of the offensive star players. However, Georgia has reloaded time and time and time again in this decade. But ask LSU in 2020. There's a big difference between being a contender and a national champion, especially in the age of Alabama. And that's what Georgia's going to try to do. All right, guys, let's move on to this. College football, it's kind of funny when we talk about the coaches in college football. Scott Woodward, Mike Bone, and Dan Radakovich last winter did themselves some, some Cyber Monday shopping. Actually, it's Cyber Any Day, whatever. They got themselves some new coaches on deals for 2022. Actually, there weren't deals. They were actually very expensive. By the way, all those people I mentioned are the ADs of the schools that we're about to talk about. Let's examine these old faces. And in the case of Brian Kelly, I need old. Man aged 10 years going from Notre Dame to LSU, it seems like, in new places. Jay, let's start with a man who still looks like he needs to be carded anytime he gets into a club. That man is Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the unlikeliest of the old faces in new places from the coaching carousel. In going to USC, Lincoln Riley became the first Oklahoma coach since 1947 to leave for another college job. Riley built a program at Oklahoma that was the class of the Big 12, and its success could have pretty much guaranteed he could write his own ticket on the banks of the Red River for as long as he wanted. Who would have thunk that as long as he wanted would only last 5 years, and that when he left, it'd be USC that he'd leave Sooner Nation for. Granted, from the USC perspective, after the debacle of the Clay Helton era, the Trojans had to go after the biggest name coach they could. But I doubt even they could believe their good fortune that Riley was ready and willing to take on the challenge of returning one of the sport's true blue bloods back to national prominence. And Riley threw down the gauntlet after his first spring practice when he was asked if competing for the Pac-12 title in year one was a realistic goal. Here's the quote: "I'm not going to take anything off the table. I said it day one. That's not why we came here. So we expect to compete for and win championships every single year. I'll save you that question for the next 10 to 15 years. That's going to be the same answer. That's just who we are as a staff. That's what we believe in. And frankly, that's what this program should be about. This is USC. The expectation here should be to win championships every single year." end quote. The thing that I took away from that is he plans on sticking around for 10 to 15 years. Cross my fingers on that.
Oh yeah, because every coach that says that is obviously going to stick around for 10 to 15 years.
Right. He spent his first offseason in LA overhauling the roster. Nearly 40 players who were on last year's team are no longer with the program. 16 new players have transferred in. The turnover is highlighted by Riley getting Caleb Williams, his former QB1 at Oklahoma, wide receiver Jordan Addison, the reigning Biletnikoff winner from Pitt, and running back Travis Dye, who did it all for the Oregon Ducks, to trade their old school colors for USC's crimson and gold. Williams threw for 1,921 yards and 21 touchdowns, rushed for 442 yards and 6 scores, while starting just 7 games at Oklahoma last season. It'll help Riley's transition that he has a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback who's very familiar with his offense and whose true dual threat capability should give USC's offense a dimension it hasn't had in a while. Dye gives the Trojans a true 3-down running back. He rushed for 1,271 yards and 16 TDs while averaging 6 yards a carry. He caught 46 passes for 402 yards and 2 more scores. He should be one of the best backs in the Pac-12 this fall. USC needed to upgrade its overall talent at receiver after losing top 10 pick Drake London and Addison, who got 100 balls last season from Kenny Pickett for 1,593 yards and 17 touchdowns, along with former Sooner Mario Williams, who had 35 catches for 300 yards and 4 scores as a true freshman, should do that just fine. Riley also kept running back Malik Brown from SoCal High School powerhouse Mater Dei in state, and he should add another dynamic playmaker for both the passing attack and the ground game. USC has experience on the O-line, but the talent still needs to show some market improvement over last year's showing. O-line coach Josh Henson, who Riley poached from Texas A&M, has his work cut out for him, as does defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, who came west with Riley. Grinch inherits a defense that manages 21 sacks, which ranked 98th among all FBS schools, and has big question marks in the secondary, and they allowed 31.8 points per game, the highest average in the program's proud history. We all know what Riley brings to the table, and the offensive firepower that USC can potentially bring to bear should make them a contender in the Pac-12. The coaching staff he brought with him from Norman, along with the ones he hired, give the Trojans the best set of coaches they've had in years. And by keeping Dante Williams from the previous staff, USC's ability to recruit should continue at a high level, with plenty of in-state recruits now looking to stay home. If they can get the defense on par with the offense, then the future looks pretty bright on and off the field for the school previously known as Heisman U, no matter what conference they play in.
Yeah, which will be the Big Ten in about 2 years plus. And I think for USC, this is the time to strike. You said what was perfectly needed to be said. Staying home, because California has some of the best high school prospects in the country, and that's one of the reasons why West Coast football has kind of failed over the last few years, because those players go to the SEC almost all.
Well, not just the SEC. Think of the number of California high 4-star and 5-star recruits that Riley himself took from LA and from California and brought them to Norman. True. Now that he's in LA, they're staying put. And that was one, it used to be back in the day when USC was a national powerhouses, the big high school programs were literally pipelines into USC. That changed. And when that changed, so did USC's prominence.
Yeah, we'll see. This is a very interesting team, and I kind of really think the Pac-12 does have a path to be a very fun conference in 2022. Agreed. All right, Anthony, Mario Cristobal went the other way. He left the Pac-12.
You can't go home.
Well, there's a lot of people that can't go home, but one of them is Mario Cristobal, who ends up going back over to Florida to coach at the University of Miami.
Yeah, you talk about trying to return a once powerhouse university of prominence. That's what Mario Cristobal has in mind. Yes, the U, trying to get them back. First of all, he's taking over a program that has not won a bowl game since 2016 and hasn't won. It's only won 10 games twice since 2003. Obviously, going back to 2003 was the last time they played for a national championship, which I know our good friend Lisa don't want me to bring this up. 20 years anniversary. I'll leave it at that. But anyway, because it comes with a resume. 35-13 record at Oregon, 2 Pac-12 titles, landed the Pac-12 top recruiting class the last 3 seasons, 37 all-conference selections, 13 NFL draft choices. Of course, you got to add a couple more when you think about Kevin Thibodeau, now playing with the New York Giants. 6 All-Americans, 3 national award winners in that time with the University of Oregon. Now he goes back to the Miami Hurricanes, where he was part of 2 national championships, by the way, 1989 and 1991 respectively, has a standout offensive lineman. He's the only coach in the nation who has played in a Power 5 conference championship game in each of the past 3 seasons of Oregon. 20 years of college football experience, but one of his biggest strengths, and by the way, he has a national championship in 2015 with Alabama, being part of the Crimson Tide's coaching staff. So there's a lot of experience and prestige he's bringing back to his alma mater. But he's also known as a very good recruiter. He's bringing over a couple of transfers over as well from Oregon. Logan Sapolo and Jonathan Dennis being 2 of those, and recruited a top edge rusher in Jaden Wade and Riley Williams, who was top high school recruits as well. But one of the things that he is trying to bring is a culture, toughness, and accountability. But he did one thing that I don't agree with. He got rid of the turnover chain. That's right. I thought that was one of the best things, and we've seen a bunch of copycats around college football in recent years. But the turnover chain, I thought, it screamed Miami. It screamed to you. It screamed bravado, swag, everything that we know from the Jimmy Johnson era to even that great 2001, in my opinion, is the greatest college football team I've ever seen. From top to bottom, NFL Hall of Famers and guys that just knew how to play football outright. But I was like, not the turnover chain, keep the turnover chain. But you know what? Because look, Miami has fallen on hard times in recent years. They really have struggled, and maybe a change of philosophy, a change of culture, maybe just that. He is a Miami native, FYI, so maybe he knows a lot more about the University of Miami than a guy who vacationed there recently. So I'm going to take it. I think a lot of Miami alumni is going to take his word for it, but we see how it goes, because right now, unlike USC, where they may be in a position to compete for the conference title, Miami in the ACC might be a bit of a rebuilding year. Next year and beyond that, I think we'll really see what Cristobal can do as far as recruiting and putting this and trying to put the program back in the national spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, I understand why he got rid of the turnover chain, because that harkens back to, days of yore gone by when the U was, the criminals of college football. And you got to remember, while Cristobal may be an alum, and he may be a Miami guy, the culture he's trying to instill in South Beach is the culture he built in Oregon. And it's a completely different kind of a philosophy of culture. So I understand that. And I'll tell you guys, in terms of all the coaching change that happened in the offseason, I equate Cristobal going to Miami with Buck Showalter coming to the Mets. Cristobal was the right coach for Miami to hire, and he was the only coach for them to hire.
Accountability. Accountability. I think that's the most important thing. When you brought up Buck Showalter and holding players accountable, I think that Cristobal, the culture he wants to bring in is just that the hold players accountable, not just on the field, but off it as well. Think about it. Miami we're talking about Miami, Florida. It's a great city, great party city, but these are young men too. So you want them to be responsible on the field and just as much as off of it. And I guess the turnover chain, taking that away, it's kind of first steps is that, hey, look, we're going to be men on the field, but we're going to be just as men and accountability off the field as well. So he's taking the baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember, this is a named routine this 2 years ago, too. I agree, by the way, on all of the turnover chain stuff that you mentioned. However, Miami is Miami. So you're going to Cristobal can change the culture as much as he wants. Turnover chain notwithstanding, but considering who is an alumni of Miami, it's always going to be swag you. And that's just the bottom line on that. But getting rid of the turnover chain kind of takes away the era of Manny Diaz and everybody else and brings it to now.
Exactly.
Speaking of culture shocks, let's get to Brian Kelly moving over to LSU. It was one of the biggest shocks of anything that happened in the offseason, just because of the fact that Brian Kelly seemed very happy at Notre Dame and seemed like he was a very good fit at Notre Dame. Got to 2 college football playoffs, got to a national title game before there was the college football playoff. Didn't do well in any of those games whatsoever, but got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish there. And then he got a 10-year, $100 million contract to get down to LSU. Now, with all of the little things that have happened since then, his fake Southern accent at a LSU Tigers basketball game to pump up the crowd, his dancing with recruits sometimes when they got signed, and then immediately they ended up going somewhere else. Brian Kelly is not the type of person who you would think would follow the Les Miles era or the Ed Orgeron era at LSU, because he doesn't have the swagger of those 2 players. But he has the consistency of being a guy who went 9 to 10 wins almost every single year at Notre Dame, and the respectability. This is not going to be the year where he turns around LSU. They do have one of the top wide receivers in the country in Keyshawn Boots. He did have a year where he had 509 yards and 9 TDs after only 6 games. He will be a Biletnikoff Award finalist if he does play a full season. They have a little bit of a quarterback controversy, but they have Jaden Daniels, a transfer from Arizona State, possibly the most accomplished quarterback they've had since a little guy named Burrow led the offense in their national title team in 2020. Just the god Joe Burrow. But looking at the Tigers' schedule, we'll talk about their game in a moment against Florida State. They'll play Mississippi State. They'll play out. They have a very rough November going with Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. They seem like they're going to go through a little bit of struggles. Again, this is not the season to think that they're going to turn everything around and be the exact same team that Ed Orgeron had in 2020. But they do have a 15 high schoolers in the first recruiting class. Got 15 players from the transfer portal. Brian Kelly is going to build a winner probably as this team goes on. Again, there is still a lot this team needs to do on a lot of different parts of the field. Discipline needs to come back into this organization. You did not see that at all in the Ed Orgeron era. The reason why they won the title in 2020 is because they had Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow, 3 guys who, and probably the most talented offensive team we've ever seen in this sport.
Yeah.
But I do, like I said, for all the making fun that we do of Brian Kelly, and again, a guy like Brian Kelly being in a Southern school like LSU is the culture shock of culture shocks. But LSU hires stars to be their head coaches, and Brian Kelly is the star that could get this team over to the same level that they were just a few years ago. LSU did not have back-to-back losing seasons since 1998 and 99 until they did last year to make it 2020 and 2021. I expect that's not going to happen again anytime soon with Brian Kelly in charge. All right, guys, let's move on. So, the last 2 Heisman Trophy winners are from Alabama. Jesus Christ. I know. In the last 7 seasons, Alabama has won Heisman trophies at all of the skill position. Derrick Henry in 15, Devontae Smith in 20, and last year when Bryce Young broke through the quarterback drought that they had at wide receiver. So Alabama also has the first returning Heisman Trophy winner in 6 years. Anybody want to guess who the last returning Heisman Trophy winner to school was?
You said 6 years?
6 years.
2014, 2015?
10 seconds. Lamar Jackson. Jackson won it in Louisville, and he did not have a great second year. All right. So anyway, let's stop all of this Alabama love and talk about a little more Alabama love. Bryce Young is one of the people we're going to talk about. Duh, when you win the Heisman Trophy, you should be a Heisman Trophy candidate again the year after. Jay, why does Bryce have a chance to pull off the Archie Griffin and be the first repeat winner in over 4.5 decades?
It is rare that college football has a returning Heisman winner, as you just noted, Rabbi. Even rarer is one who has a legitimate chance to pull the Archie Griffin and be the first repeat winner since 1975. Bryce Young, quarterback of Alabama, who is also the reigning SEC Offensive Player of the Year, has that legitimate chance. Completed 66.9% of his passes, 4,872 yards, 8.9 yards per attempt, 47 touchdowns against only 7 picks, a 167.5 passer rating last season. His passing yards, passing TDs both led the SEC and were second in the nation. When you consider that he put up those numbers with a very untied-like offensive line that didn't give him much of a pocket to throw from last season, as I talked about in our first segment, it makes those numbers seem all the more remarkable. Are the odds against him? Yes, mostly because the Heisman committee isn't big on repeat winners. A reigning winner has to put up numbers that surpass what he did the previous year, and that'll be a tough road for Young to travel, especially with the losses the Tide had after last season. Each of their top 4 reception leaders, as previously noted, Evan Neal, their best pass protector, all of them are gone. Young will also have to contend with a pair of teammates potentially stealing votes from him, starting with edge rusher Will Anderson, whose ridiculous season I detailed in our first segment. And as I noted in that segment, the Tide added a pair of playmakers via the transfer portal in former Georgia wide receiver Jermaine Burton and former Georgia Tech running back Jamar Gibbs. Gibbs, who, as I noted, is a legitimate Heisman contender himself, will be a weapon for Bryce Young, as will Burton, and potentially one of the returning group of wide receivers. And if they all kind of play up to their potential, Young might be able to put up some numbers that will at least have him in the conversation for a trip to New York. A lot of ifs, but I still think he has a legit chance and should be in the conversation most of the year.
4,872 yards last year and a 47-7 TD to INT ratio, and that's insane. And he's probably going to have to put up 5,000 yards, by the way, to have a chance to get that.
He's going to have to account for 50 total touchdowns again.
He's going to have to pull the Tebow, essentially. Anthony, let's talk about Heisman U. Ironically enough, USC has a contender at the quarterback position.
Yeah, well, Lincoln Riley left from Oklahoma to go to USC. He also took a little parting gift in the name of Caleb Williams, who actually played as a freshman and started some games. Here's his numbers in a short window that he played last season: 1,912 yards, 21 touchdowns, took over 4 interceptions. Has a dual threat, by the way, and we all know Lincoln Riley's good with dual threat quarterbacks. There's one in Arizona right now that we were just talking about, that we will probably talk about in a few weeks on our NFL kickoff show. 442 yards, scoring 6 times on 79 carries. Now, we know Riley is a bit of a quarterback whisperer and can make wonders. So Caleb Williams have 2 things going for him: a great coach, also a schedule, let's see, that is not as daunting outside of Notre Dame and Utah. USC does not play Oregon this season, so that was a bit of a surprise there. And Riley's teams went 55-10 and never lost more than 2 games in the 5 seasons he coached while at Oklahoma. But also, here's another tidbit: they have Jordan Addison, who is a transfer from Pitt, joining him at USC. So that gives him another added weapon. And Caleb Williams with a full season under his belt, I think he'll be in the conversation. I mean, and you saw in the small window that he played what he can do. Now let's see what he can do with a full season with a guy very famous with developing quarterbacks, and now a
prime wide receiver, Anthony. As I said, he's the Biletnikoff winner. I mean, look at what Kenny Pickett last year.
Yeah, CJ Stroud. Caleb Williams is a very interesting story, just the way, because he backed up a guy who was also a Heisman favorite last year in Spencer Rattler, and now all of a sudden he's the man from the beginning. If there was a game to watch last year, watch the Texas-Oklahoma game, where Oklahoma
Red
came
River
massively
rivalry.
back in the second half. And CJ Williams was excellent in that game, played the dual threat quarterback as good as anybody has. And it's a good pick. It's not favorite.
Yeah, but by the way, by the way, second highest pass efficiency by a true freshman the last 14 years, 169.63. That is incredible for a guy, for anybody, let alone a true freshman.
Yeah, no. Like I said, this is going to be a very interesting year. I would almost put him as a better choice to be a 2023 Heisman winner if he stays, but the favorite in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, he's the betting favorite almost everywhere.
Yes, it's CJ Stroud of Ohio State. He had one of the best passing seasons in Ohio State football history in 2021. He had a 4,435-yard season. Only Dwayne Haskins was second with 48-13. He had 44 touchdowns, and he twice tied the single game record with 6 touchdown passes and became the Buckeyes' first 500-yard passer with a 573-yard shelling of Utah in the Rose Bowl. That was the also game that had Jackson Smith-Njigba going for over 370 yards. Stroud also joined Haskins as the only Big Ten 4,000-yard passers. And this is a very, very, very good offense that he has. We talked about it before. You have Harrison back. You have Njigba. You have probably the best wide receiving core in all of football. And I think there's a reason why Ohio State is getting all of this love, and it's very deserved too. They have almost all the quarterbacks that have developed under Ryan Day have been amazing college football quarterbacks. And CJ Stroud is the perfect college football quarterback. And again, he will have a lot of chances to ball out this year. He plays great teams like Arkansas State, Toledo. There's Rutgers on the schedule. I can just pencil you in for 15 touchdowns right now just between those 3 teams alone. There will also be national stages. He'll have Notre Dame that we'll talk about in a moment in week 1. He'll have Penn State later in the year. He'll have Michigan on November 26th, and then he'll probably have a Big Ten title game if they win that game. CJ Stroud has 2 things going for him. He has the best weapons in the country, and he has a chip on his shoulder after being the guy who was the quarterback that lost to Michigan last year. And as we mentioned before, Ohio State don't lose to Michigan and don't forget about it in the next season. And they're not going to forget this. I really think Ohio State has a very good chance to do what they did with Ezekiel Elliott in 2015 and possibly win it all. But they haven't won a Heisman Trophy in a long time. And CJ Stroud is the perfect guy to do it. I know it's chalk, but there are some Captain Obvious picks out there. This is one of them. Okay. So as we mentioned a while ago, this week coming up is week 0 for college football. Yes, college football 9 damn days before Labor Day. College sports is always beginning earlier and earlier all the time. Go to your favorite restaurant. What we call this week is the sampler platter. You want it, you can have it. But I would rather wait for the very good menu that's coming up in week 1. It's a creme de la creme menu, so to speak. So let's get to it. Anthony, let's talk about Notre Dame. We haven't talked about them yet, and they're the number 5 team in the AP poll. They have a new face on the sideline, and Marcus Friedman. He did coach in the Fiesta Bowl, but this is his real first regular season game. He is, I think, younger than us, or about the same age as us, which makes me want to cry. But he does get a chance to add
younger than all of us.
Well, yes, he's definitely younger than you, Jay, and we're talking more about the people that's in the.
No, he's younger than you guys.
No, I know, and that's what we're talking about beforehand. Anyway, enough with the old jokes. Marcus Freeman gets a huge chance in week 1 to improve Notre Dame's resume, and not.
Yeah, I mean, how about this? Your first real coaching regime, and it starts going to Columbus, Ohio, to take on the Ohio State University in the very first game. Look, Marcus Freeman. If there was any day that Brian Kelly leaving did do was and allowed a very popular person, Marcus Freeman, to step in and become the head coach. I mean, we all saw the reactions from the players. They absolutely love the guy. But now, coming off a Fiesta Bowl loss, which they did lead and couldn't hold on to, now it's going to be up to Marcus Freeman to really kind of step it up and see what he can do now that he is the captain of the ship. Looking at the offense, the team overall, Jack Holmes, Kyrie Williams, and Kevin Austin are all gone. And Kyle Hamilton is now playing for the Baltimore Ravens. That's the star safety on defense. So now going into the season, Tyler Buckner, the dual threat that we saw sporadically last season, he's going to take over as a star quarterback. Completed 21-35 for 298, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So he's going to be making his full start as well. So that's going to be one thing. But he has some help with Chris Timey and Logan Diggs. Expected to be kind of 1-2 combination coming out of the backfield. But Notre Dame defense and what got Marcus Freeman the coaching job in the first place is the defense. They had a bend but don't break defense that played very well throughout most of last season and get into the and having such a good season. Brandon Joseph, they did bring in All-American from Northwestern. He's pretty much going to be the guy that lessens the blow when Hamilton's departure. But going into this game, it's going to be, I look at it like this, it's strength against strength. And you look at Ohio State's high-power offense against Notre Dame's defense, and the question is going to be, can Notre Dame put up enough points? And we know, I talked earlier in the show about Ohio State's defensive struggles. Obviously, with a new system and going into the first game, there's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be some big plays to be had. Can Notre Dame offense take advantage of that? And can the defense keep them in the game long enough? So I think it's going to be a closer game than people anticipate. Ohio State is heavily favored because of the offense.
16.5 points.
Yeah, 16.5 point favorite. That's as big as it gets. But I do think Ohio State's going to probably win this game. It's just going to be a question of if Notre Dame is going to pull the upset. It's going to have to be the defense. Can they get the stops? Can they keep the game close enough? And can the offense string together enough drives and keep and be able to put points on the board? Obviously, when you have a high-power offense like what Ohio State presents, the best offense, the best defense against that is a good offense. Keep them off the field as long as possible, and that's what's going to come down to. Can Buckner complete his passes? Can they get the first downs? Can they keep the chains moving and keep that Buckeye offense on the sideline drinking Gatorade as long as possible? If they can do that, the defense can force some mistakes, get some turnovers. I think the game would be a lot closer than whatever the odds makers are thinking about. I think I think they're kind of getting ahead of themselves, but I think it will be a close game. I do see Ohio State still managing to pull off a win, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think.
First non-ACC well, Cincy was a big game for them last year, and they kind of didn't look like they were on their level either. But a Notre Dame team in an unusual situation of playing a big regular season game against a non-ACC opponent in the beginning of the season is very intriguing to me, but we'll see what happens. And that'll be the late game on Saturday.
And keep in mind, Ohio State has shown that they can be beaten in the first game. You saw it last year at Northwestern.
That wasn't Northwestern. That was Oregon, but
in the very first game, pushed it to the limit.
Yeah, and they lost.
They beat them in their home opener last year.
And they lost in the second game to Oregon. And the only reason I say that is that transitions, Jay, to Oregon facing off against the defending national champs in a pseudo home game for Georgia.
Yeah,
pseudo home game, but
home game. Yeah, the Dan Lanning era in Eugene starts with the former Georgia defensive coordinator heading to Atlanta in week 1 and taking on the program he helped lead to the national championship last season. A win would defy expectations and set the tone for both Oregon and possibly the Pac-12. Kirby Smart is 3-0 against his former assistants, beating Sam Pittman in Arkansas in 2020 and Pittman and Shane Beamer of South Carolina in 2021. The rabbi pretty much told you all you need to know about the Dogs, but the Ducks bring a pretty talented squad to this matchup. New Oregon offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, who will be calling plays for the first time, brings an offensive scheme that he learned under former boss Mike Norvell at FSU and has its roots in the Gus Malzahn system that Dillingham was part of when he was at Auburn in 2019. Lanning worked for Norvell and with Dillingham at Memphis, so he has seen this offense at its most explosive. The quarterback on that 2019 Auburn team, by the way, none other than Bo Nix, the 2019 SEC Freshman of the Year, who transferred to Oregon ahead of this season. Nix, in 11 games in 2019, completed 59.9% of his passes, 2,415 yards, 6.7 yards per attempt, with 16 scores against 6 picks and a 125 passer rating. Nix hasn't officially been named the Duck starter for week 1, but I'd be surprised if he's not under center on September 3rd. Whomever has taken the snaps will be playing behind one of the best offensive lines in college football, one that goes 7 deep and has plenty of game experience, which will be important in trying to protect their quarterback against what should be a formidable Georgia pass rush, as well as opening holes for the Oregon ground game. As I said earlier, the Ducks lost do everything running back Travis Dye to USC, but Byron Cardwell and Sean Dollars are primed to step in. Cardwell was Dye's understudy. He rushed for 417 yards in 12 games, averaging 6.8 per carry. He's likely to get first crack at being RB1. Dollars seemed primed for a breakout, but had his entire 2021 season wiped out by a knee injury. Now in his 4th season with the team, he's healthy and he has a chance to make an impact. The wide receiver room lost Devon Williams and Johnny Johnson, but they return a young athletic group led by redshirt sophomore Chris Huston, 31 catches for 419 yards, he finished the season with a 6-catch game in the Alamo Bowl loss to Oklahoma. Troy Franklin, 18 catches for 209 yards, was a highly touted recruit who won a starting job in preseason camp, but started the season banged up. And Dante Thornton, who came in the same 2021 recruiting class as Franklin and showed some ability to be a deep threat, 19.4 yards per catch on only 9 grabs, though, in a limited role. Both could develop into solid wideouts in this offense. The group, though, that Georgia's back 7 will have to really account for is the Ducks tight ends. 6'7", 240-pound, fifth-year junior Spencer Webb leads the group, but sophomores Terrence Ferguson and Moliki Matavao are just as big and also capable of producing mismatches in coverage. With Lanning running the defense against a Georgia offense he saw in practice all of last season, the Ducks may have a better than average chance to keep the Bulldogs from putting up crooked numbers on the scoreboard. It starts at the linebacker position with Noah Sewell and hopefully a healthy Justin Flo. Sewell led the Ducks with 114 tackles, and his instincts as well as his ability to move well for his size have NFL scouts drooling about their team's chances to take him in the upcoming draft. Injuries have limited Flo, the number 6 recruiting class of 2020, to just 2 games as a Duck. If he can stay healthy and stay on the field and he lives up to the potential he showed as a recruit, then Lanning will have a dynamic middle of his defense that will only help the D-line and the secondary play to their potential, though they will have to find someone or a few someones to replace the pass rush threat that Kayvon Thibodeau gave them, and hope the Colorado transfer Christian Gonzalez and Dante Manning, the highest recruited defensive back Oregon has ever signed, nailed down the starting cornerback roles. Georgia's offensive and defensive units will be a huge test for an Oregon team that has designs on recapturing its perch atop the Pac-12. But as a coach familiar with the Ducks personnel said back in July, here's the quote: Cristobal left them a championship roster. Is it enough talent to knock off a defending champion who lost 15 players from last year's team in a neutral field game to open the season? A lot of folk want the answers to that question, which is why, for me, this is the must-see week 1 matchup.
All right, so I'm going to look quickly at the best of the rest. They're all involving the SEC.
Of course they are.
The world does revolve around the SEC right now,
yeah.
And they're all big matchups too. So I'll start you off with Florida State LSU. They'll play on Sunday night 4th. Brian Kelly actually played Florida State last year in a very good game. That was 41-38. This will be another pseudo home game. This will actually be at the Superdome. So you tell me if LSU is going to have a semi-home field advantage. The big game for LSU to kind of prove that they are kind of in a national level again and again. There is always the least bit of patience if you lose badly in week 1, especially in front of your home crowd. But FSU's Mike Norvell is in year 3, and he was he's 8-13 in Florida State. Man got a 6-year, $26.5 million contract. Need to kind of justify that now, because if they does it, Florida State's going to be looking for another head coach and looking to just get back to the days of Jimbo Fisher. Not even a Bobby Bowden, just a Jimbo Fisher. Could be an interesting game. It's a very close game. I believe LSU was a 3-point favorite in this game. These two teams have not played since 1991. LSU and FSU faced off 9 times pretty much in the Bowden era. The Noles won 7. I think LSU is a much better team, obviously, than that now. And Florida State needs a kickstart. This could do it. I'm going to take you to the only other ranked matchup next that these two mentioned, the first two. The other one is Arkansas and Cincinnati. You remember Cincinnati. That's the team that finally broke through that mid-major banner last year and got themselves into the CFP. Got killed by Alabama when they got there, but
they broke the ceiling.
They did, but the ceiling is now going to cave back on them because there is a lot of skill positions gone, including Spencer Rattler, who is now the Atlanta Falcons backup quarterback. There might be big
Desmond Ritter.
Desmond Ritter. I don't know why I called him Spencer Rattler. Because of the Oklahoma stuff from earlier. Cincinnati can hold up front, but they've lost so much in several areas. And Arkansas is a good team, but they do not have a big pass rush. They were a surprise last year in the SEC. They walloped Texas A&M before Texas A&M went on a good run at the end of the season and played Alabama pretty much through all 60 minutes of their game. This is a good game for Arkansas because it's a test of Cincinnati coming into there. It's a big test for Cincinnati to get one big win on their resume. I don't think we're going to see a American team or any team outside of the Power Five get themselves to a national title game, but a Cincinnati win over Arkansas could lead the road to respectability a little bit. The last matchup I'm going to mention is a very weird matchup that it doesn't seem like it would ever happen except in a week 1. But Utah and Florida is very interesting to me. Florida is going to begin the Billy Napier era, and they've had a very good recruiting year and a lot of good energy that kind of was sapped out during the last months of Dan Mullen being at Florida. Big time line. That's what happened. That's what you bring one from Louisiana. They have a lot of good running backs, does Florida. They're going to be a lot better than they were last year, but last year they were terrible. They do have Anthony Richardson as quarterback. That is a big plus. He is a NFL quarterback prospect, so keep an eye on him throughout the year. But Utah has a little something special in my book. They made themselves very known last year. They were very close to getting themselves into a Rose Bowl victory over Ohio State. They lost 4 times last year, but they lost to all good teams. They lost to BYU, they lost to the Rose Bowl, and they lost to a good Oregon State team. They also lost to San Diego State. But Utah is ranked 7th in the first AP poll of the year. And if you know Utah, that's a very weird ranking for them. So you take a look at that team has a ton of talent. They can compete for a Pac-12 title and possibly a CFP berth. We'll talk about that in a moment. And winning again at Florida is the first start. It's a big weekend coming up for the Pac-12 because of a lot of the rumors of their just ultimate demise with the UCLA and USC move to the Big Ten in 2024. I think if Oregon or Utah can get these wins in the Southeast against the Southeastern Conference, it'll go a long way to helping out the Pac-12's respectability for 2022, and it could at least get them on the map for a possible CFP berth. Speaking of CFP, let's talk about this. The college football playoff future might be up in the air. That's a whole nother show. Shut up. We'll get to it another time. Keep your thoughts to yourself. But we still have a CFP going on for this year and the next few years after that. New Year's Eve, which is a Saturday, so you get your normal Saturday football, will be the semis and the national, and that'll be the Fiesta Bowl and I can't even think of it right now. I think it's the Cotton Bowl. So
it's the Cotton Bowl. We just double check.
But I'll take a look. It could be it's the Fiesta Bowl and the Chick-fil-A Bowl. It's the Fiesta Bowl and the Chick-fil-A Bowl for this year. Listen, Jay, this is not your father's bowl era. The Peach Bowl is what it used to be called, and that's what it gets. It's the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Okay. With all that being said, the Chick-fil-A Bowl never played on a Sunday. Anyway, New Year's Eve, which is on a Saturday for the semis and the national title game, 12 days after, right where Jay is technically background standing right there at the SoFi Stadium, the house, which is really, really goddamn expensive. That's on Monday, January 11th. So, time for us to get a Final Four. Let's start with Anthony.
Okay, my Final Four would be Alabama. I will go Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. I think they're locks. For fourth team, I think Notre Dame is going to actually squeeze in as the number 4. I think it helps that they are independent and that they're not tied to a conference. If they can maybe even, I don't see them going undefeated, but maybe being a one-loss team and not having to deal with a conference championship game and being that may actually help out Notre Dame. We've actually seen that in years past with Notre Dame with a good resume, able to get in as the number 3 and the number 4 team. So those are my 4 teams. It'll be Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Notre Dame playing New Year's Eve at least to get to SoFi Stadium, the home of WrestleMania, by the way. Because I have to throw that in.
Yes.
So that's my 4 picks.
Okay. I have a big game for you during the season. If Jay goes the way I think he's going to go with his 4 picks,
let's see if I go the way you think I'm going to do. I mean, I'm with Anthony on the first 3. Alabama for all the reasons I stated in our first segment. Ohio State for all the reasons Anthony stated in our first segment, and Georgia, Rabbi, for all the reasons you stated in our first segment. They're the top 3 teams in practically every preseason poll for a reason. In my opinion, the gap between them and the rest of the top 5, let alone the rest of the top 25, is glaring. I can't get on the Clemson train. I know they're ranked 4th in a lot of the polls. Dabo Swinney is one of the best coaches in the game, but I just don't trust their quarterback. He's nowhere near the level of Stetson Bennett at Georgia, let alone the top 2 preseason and Heisman candidates taking the snaps for Bama and the Buckeyes. So I decided to channel my inner Sean Roman and take a dark horse as my 4th horseman, if you will, and go with Kyle Whittingham's 7th ranked Utah squad, the reigning Pac-12 champs. And Rabbi's looking at me like that because I just stole his thunder. In 2022, Utah returned 17 total starters, 8 on offense, 6 on defense, and all 3 specialists, kicker, punter, and long snapper, highlighted by a pair of redshirt junior all-conference players in quarterback Cam Rising and running back Tavion Thomas, who opted to return after rushing for 1,108 yards and 21 TDs last season. After being benched early in that season due to ball security issues, Thomas broke the school's single-season rushing TD record with those 21. 10% of his 204 carries went for 6. Rising started the last 11 games and proved to be the ideal fit for Andy Ludwig's run-first play-action offensive scheme that annoyed the hell out of defenses across the conference. Rising accounted for 26 total touchdowns, 20 through the air, 6 with his legs, and had the highest ESPN QBR of any Pac-12 quarterback. That 84.2 rating was 6th nationwide. Utah's offense in 2021 was the most balanced in the conference, totaling exactly 3,000 passing yards and a little over 3,035 rushing yards over 14 games. They opened against Florida in the Swamp, as Rabbi just noticed, and that's pretty much a must-win game in terms of a CFP berth, as the rest of their schedule is not loaded with top 25 teams. The only other Pac-12 teams in the AP preseason top 25 are Oregon at number 11 and USC at number 14. Utah has to go to Eugene on the next to last week of the season, but they do get the Trojans at home in week 7. Do they need to run the table to be in consideration for that 4th FCP spot? Most likely, yes, on how the Pac-12 is viewed by the committee. Is it impossible? No. especially if Rising can stay healthy and put up another all-conference season. Thomas continues to be a touchdown machine, and the defense continues to be its typically stalwart self that it's been under Whittingham. In my mind, if all that happens, then Utah making the CFP wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Oh, that was actually going to be my third pick, but I'm going to switch it up. And so here's where I'm going. I have to go Alabama and Ohio State. Those two are very obvious. Those two are by far the most talented offenses in the country. And if Ohio State can even come anywhere near a decent defensive team, they're the national championship favorites. And we know this era. Alabama doesn't miss college football playoffs, and there's no reason why they should this year either. They have so much talent coming back. And when you have 3 Heisman Trophy winners, it's easy. I don't believe Georgia is going to get to the college football playoff because I think Georgia is going to lose once going in to the SEC championship. And I said before, I think Alabama is a better team than Georgia. And then you have a 2-loss SEC team. And then it comes a little bit more of a troublesome situation. So I'm going to go with with a semi dark horse pick that none of you talked about. And it's Lincoln Riley's old school in Oklahoma. I love Brent Venables as a head coach.
Yeah, that's a nice.
Coming in as Clemson defensive coordinator, he finally found the right job for him to jump. And yes, you don't have Caleb Williams anymore. You have Dylan Gabriel as your quarterback, but you know what? Oklahoma is just always talented year after year after year, and the Big 12 is not a bad conference. You can lose a game in the Big 12 and still make it to the college football playoff. I, however, look at this Oklahoma schedule and I see at Nebraska, at TCU, Red River Rivalry, West Virginia, at Oklahoma State is not the last game of the season for them this year. That's actually November 19th. Texas Tech is the last game of the season. They're going to be favored in all 12 games. And honestly, I think Brent Venables is going to be an amazing coach for this team, going to teach this team defense, going to teach this team how to be a complete team. And this could be a very complete Oklahoma team. So I have them as my number 3. I have the same situation with number 4. And this is going to be very controversial. And this is going to be one of the most controversial things that we're going to see in the wild for the CFP. And here's why. I was thinking of Michigan, but I don't think they're in the level of Ohio State. And I do think there's still a little bit of issues with that team. Although Michigan's schedule, there's too many holes, but if I don't believe in Georgia, it really is the best of the rest. Because honestly, the national title game is going to be Alabama and Ohio State. Spoiler alert, they're that good.
Yeah.
But I settled on Texas A&M as my 4th team. I like the way Jimbo Fisher has done with this team over the last few years. They get Max Johnson back as their quarterback. They have a bunch of returning starters. They were kind of disappointing last year. They lost 3 games. They lost back-to-back games against Arkansas and Mississippi State. Then, as an 18-point underdog at home, they beat Alabama. And then they lost the last game at LSU. It was a very good close game, 24-27, 27-24. But they are probably the second best team talent-wise in the SEC. Yes, better than Georgia, especially offensively, because I think Max Johnson's a very good dual threat quarterback, and you get both wide receivers back in, Anna Smith and Evan Stewart. So I'll tell you, my theory is if they get by in those first 5 weeks, if they go undefeated, and they should be. The only real challenge is Miami on the 14th, and then again another matchup in Arkansas in Arlington on the 24th. They could lose that game in Alabama. That's an October 8th game. They finish the rest of the season undefeated. They don't make the SEC title game, but A&M becomes a 1-loss team. And again, I've mentioned to you, we have such a weird year that there's no team who I think, Utah possibly, but I don't think that the CFP would reward a 1 or 2 loss Pac-12 team over a 1-loss SEC team regardless.
Probably not.
So, you know what? In
Rabbi,
this year of A&M,
the only way that happens is if the Pac-12 as a conference basically runs the table on its big
they They have to run their table on their big games.
Big out of conference wins.
And there has to be one dominant team in the conference. They can't beat each other up, because if they beat each other up, that's going to go against the point, having a 2 or 3 loss team. But in my theory, I do think there's precedent for this before. Alabama, when they won the national title in 2017, did it as a number 4 team, and they didn't have to play in the SEC championship. They lost to Auburn the week before. Right. So I think that's going to happen with A&M. So I have Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and A&M as my 4 teams.
Well, I like the fact that we, for the most part, we have three different 4s. So yours is the one that's probably furthest out there. Mine's the one probably.
It's not even. It's funny. The funny thing is, it's not furthest out there. I didn't pick a team that's outside of the preseason top 10.
No.
But it sounds out there because of what I'm saying.
Right, because the scenario that you are basing that on is a scenario. Granted, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. It's only happened once, and I think the reason Alabama got in this year is that year because one simple reason: they're Alabama. I don't know if Texas A&M gets that same level of cachet, but I'll tell you this much: if it coming down to the end of the season, that scenario is looking likely, and we get to talk about it, that's going to make for a good segment.
There's a lot of things about college football that we could talk about, but again, we need to go. So for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. On Wednesday, September 7th, it'll be our NFL preview as we'll bring back our good friend Joe Tafaro, as we will be on the eve of the 103rd season of the NFL. So the long pigskin road ahead will begin. You know the socials by now. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines, Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines. That's to watch on demand and live, respectively. And Jay, go ahead.
Our Twitter handle is @ONTH Sportslines, where you will find a link to this show and other interesting sports tidbits that we think are worth your time to check out.
While Anthony goes back to watching the Mets and praying that the Braves actually lose a game. I
go back to watching the Yankees, who were up 8-0 in the 4th against Oakland.
And by the way, tomorrow night I will be at Citi Field. My mom would be joining me. So
looking to continue the winning streak.
Yeah, so yes, I'm looking for my winning streak, and I have Miss Sharon along with me for tomorrow.
What's your record this season?
14-1, right?
14-1. So it's been really good. 14-game winning streak. I mean, the first game I went to against Arizona was the only loss so far. Like I said, and look, I mean, the Mets won tonight. Is a little dicey though, but I'm a little worried. Last few days we've been leaving a community on its scoring position on base, so we gotta start taking advantage of these scoring opportunities.
Okay, so before we start,
the flip side of it, the Yankees are finally actually not leaving a crap ton of guys on base.
That means Stanton's back on the lineup, and that's why. Okay, before we get into a baseball pennant race show in the next hour, we're gonna say good night from On the Sports Lines.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.